6 people have died and dozens had to be rescued when a boat carrying migrants from France to the United Kingdom capsized. It's the latest tragedy to unfold in the English Channel as dozens of small migrant boats tried to cross the dangerous waterway. The UK's Conservative government has introduced controversial policies aimed at cutting the number of people attempting to make the crossing.
Rescue crews from England and France worked together to bring survivors ashore. More than 20 were taken here to the UK port of Dover, where medical teams helped escort those who could walk onto land, but several were in a critical condition. French authorities also ferried dozens of people back to the city of Calais. Some were taken straight to hospital.
They were in trouble. There's always seasickness and the boats are simply overloaded. They overload them so they can't move. The last boat we came to was just too full.
The small boat the migrants were travelling on was one of hundreds crossing the dangerous stretch of water in recent days.
If we mourn 6 victims today, it is the fault of traffickers and criminals who send children and adults to their deaths on these dangerous maritime routes.
France has stepped up patrols since the British government agreed to pay hundreds of millions of euros in an attempt to reduce the number of asylum seekers. People arriving from across the Channel were set to be housed on this barge. Those plans stalled when Legionnaire's bacteria were detected on board, forcing authorities to evacuate the vessel. Some doubt the strategy would have worked in any case.
Ultimately, people are not going to be disincentivised from making a small boat crossing because they're likely to be placed on a barge. Crossing in small boat is terrifying and incredibly dangerous. If you're prepared to do that, then a boat's not going to dissuade you.
The number of migrant channel crossings this year stands at more than 16,000, with over 1,100 people arriving in the past week alone.
Joining me now is Tom Brooks. He's a professor of law and government at the Durham Law School in the United Kingdom. Welcome to DW. So, according to border officials, we've seen an increase in the number of people trying to cross the English Channel just in the last couple of days. Why is that?
Well, I think you typically see a lot more crossings happening during the summer and into the autumn than you do at the beginning of the year. So this kind of pattern of more happening now in August and as we head into September is something we see in past years. Government efforts to try to stem the tide or slow things down have clearly not worked.
Well, you say they haven't worked. What should French and British authorities then be doing differently in response to the increase of these dangerous crossings?
Well, I think there's a few things that should happen. I think, one thing that was noted in the report you've played rightly were people pointing the finger at the criminal gangs. More needs to be done about that. The UK government has recently passed a new law that aims to effectively punish those who make the crossings, but not those who are behind the crossings, the gangs who coordinate and organize them. And I think there needs to be a lot more that is done about that. But the other kind of major factor is the government talks a lot about trying to deter people from making these journeys, but it doesn't really talk a lot about the causes behind what is going on. And in part, we've seen this spike, this growth of small boats has all happened after the UK left its returns policy with the EU. So it means that since for the last few years, people coming over can no longer be returned, or at least not returned very easily, back to France or elsewhere on the continent, whereas that was possible before. And I think this is a change in the law that has been exploited by some of those gangs. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed urgently as well.
Well, we should also mention it's, of course, not just in the English Channel. We're seeing similar tragedies also off the coast of Tunisia and Italy, also just in the last couple of days. In fact, we know that this year has been especially deadly for migrants trying to get to Europe. Has the European migration policy failed?
Well, the migration crisis, as it was called in 2015, we haven't seen anything like that quite since in terms of the overall numbers by sea. It's about 10% or so of what it was back then. However, the number of deaths, the percentage of deaths has increased. It's become effectively more dangerous, even if the overall numbers are not completely out of range of past years. I don't know. There's a lot that needs to be done here. I mean, one issue is the continuing evolving situation of the crises that drive people to look for homes elsewhere. We've got new problems happening, issues in Niger, South Sudan. There's continuing issues of Afghanistan. Most of those folks who were returned in the channel were apparently Afghan nationals. A lot more needs to be done in these different sites, and that's a very difficult thing to manage, requiring a lot of coordination.
That was Tom Brooks, professor of law and government at Durham Law School. Professor, thank you so much for your insights.
Pleasure.